Hello, somebodies. You're here. And coincidentally, we have a show ready. Nice. I am your host, Mr. Mafuchi, and with me is my co-host that is just straight bussin' because he used to drive a bus. He's your boy, my. Give it up for Jay.
Hello, everybody.
All right, so you're here for the marriage pros. You say, really? Marriage pros? Absolutely, because 20 plus years combined in the sticky wicket that we call nuptials. And simply put, it sounded better than just saying winging it daily pros, right? So, on today's show, raising kids. We have them. So, now Jay has 3 kids. I have 2 kids. I think both Jay and I can agree upon the fact that combined, we have had sex at least 5 times in our life. Now, what does it mean to have kids? Well, let me put it out there first, since I have the mic right now, as to what it means to have kids, my theory. So let's see if Jay agrees with this or not. I'm sure he has his own opinion, but here I go. With kids, I feel it is a very selfish act between adults. Because whether they are planned or not, the child in question has no say in anything. Doesn't have a say in gender, race, name, none of it. They are playing the lottery of life. They are helpless. And hopefully, they get dealt a good hand. But ultimately, we know how it goes. Luckily for our kids, which is myself and Jay, our kids did get dealt a good hand. They have 2 loving parents. But it's not always the case with all other kids when you really think about it. And if you go by the news and you hear about, these bad kids that just didn't grow up right, well, guess what? They all played the same lottery. They probably didn't get dealt a good hand. So how are you expecting kids that have no say in their life to just grow up and be good model citizens? That's just not fair to any of the kids. So again, planned or not, kids are the innocent, and there's no proven guilty until they become adults, and that sucks. It really does. But I don't think anybody has ever said it out loud. Now, Jay, for you, you've heard my side as to what it means to have kids. What does it mean on your end?
See, for me, when it comes to kids, I concur with a lot of what you said. But for me, whenever I think about kids, I think about how expensive they are.
Yeah.
That's one reason why I never wanted any kids. Is like I just think about how expensive they are.
Mm-hmm.
Before, I know it's different now, but as far as how much it costs to raise a child, not just like it was typically one. I think they said back maybe 10 years ago, so maybe $500,000 per child. That's how much you will spend in your lifetime
Damn.
to raise a child. And this is not including inflation, what it is right now. Probably a lot more than that. I remember hearing that report. I definitely don't want kids after hearing that. So I'm like, all this money could be going towards something else, building a legacy, investing something else where it can make you more money. So yeah, when it came to kids, that's like my initial thoughts. It's not all the happy-go-lucky thoughts, everything that women want, just nothing like grandparents want. Like I thought the complete opposite. I might just be a minority in that, but I just think of all the more of the down stuff, not the upside of having kids.
No, that's for sure, Jay. I think I remember reading maybe 10 plus years ago, and you had brought up 500K just for one child. When I read it, I think this was in the poverty side. I think it was like 215K until they turned 18, and that's just for one child. But again, that's the poverty side.
Speaking of kids, what about raising a daughter? Like myself, I have a daughter, and in my family, most of the kids are girls. So I believe I was the first grandchild that was a boy. I think I was the first one. And everyone else are girls. And I'm thinking to myself, because all my cousins and stuff who have kids, they had girls. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna have nothing but girls if I have kids. And then my first child was a girl. It was supposed to be a boy, but it was a girl. That's another story in itself. And my biggest fear for having a daughter, of course, are boys, because I know what it's like to be a boy growing up and being a man. So that was like my biggest fear. So one thing I do with my daughter is I teach her. I'll tell her, like, hey, you don't trust any man. I don't care what they say. This is just coming from me because I know I've had friends who done things opposite from me. So I know how they are, and I try not to scare her, but kind of scare her, so she can understand exactly where when a guy says something, what they actually mean. So I just take it. I'll say mostly, whatever they say, they're lying until they prove to you otherwise with their actions.
But that gets into your situation that you thought you were going to have all boys. There is one formula to get them, Jay, and that is you just go in deep. So every time you go in deep, you get a boy. I mean, it seems after your daughter, you finally caught on, like, okay, I want boys now. So you just probably powered in. You let, obviously, the wifey know, hey, I want a boy, so this is what's going to happen. Now, Jay, we get into something else. You had the daughter, so I understand why you answered first. I think this was going to be the same for me, raising a special needs child, which I do have. So, if I may, I'll just inform everyone of what it is, because up until my wife and I had our second child, we did not know, number one, the special needs title. So our second child was born with what is called Williams syndrome, which is essentially a coarctation of the aortic valve, which means the valve is pinched. So that valve has to work harder to dispense the blood to the heart. And unfortunately, that does need to be repaired surgically. And not just that, I just remembered also stenosis, which is it's kind of not a straight line, and you don't have no room to repair it. So again, surgically at 4 months, my youngest boy had to have open heart surgery to repair that. Now the way to repair that, you can't graft anything to cover up that valve. So they have to go ahead with a cow valve, take a piece of that and place it on top as a patch. That way my boy can actually pump blood normally. So that's what happens, how it's explained to me with any children that have Williams syndrome, that from the time they're born till they're age 5, at some point they will need to have that surgically repaired. Now it was scary on my part because when it was day for surgery, they took him in. And this is all afterwards the doctor had a successful surgery. He told us, hey, as soon as we made the incision, I mean, that heart was giving out. So he painted the picture that he had to hold our son's heart on his hand and massage it to keep it pumping, which is just scary in itself. If he hadn't have done that, I mean, who knows? And then I think it was at least 10 plus hours of surgery. It was 11 weeks of recovery. And that's horrible for parents because my son had so many tubes stuck into his body just to pump blood, to pump food, to pump air, all this stuff because it was such a traumatic surgery. Not only that, his incision in the middle of it for his heart, a lot of people, because of the Pledge of Allegiance, feels that their heart's right here. No, it's straight in the middle. He still had that open but covered up. So because of the blood pumping machine, they told us they had to take him off that so he can breathe on his own and pump blood on his own. By the second time, it had failed when they took him off. So the doctor told us, hey, if this third time doesn't catch on, we can't turn it back on. So we'll need you to prepare yourself. So my wife and I were just scared, something less. And luckily, our son did finally catch on. Like, he wanted to live. So that is a traumatic experience that I wish upon no one. But when it comes to special needs, anyone that has Williams syndrome, they go through that. And luckily for us, our son will never remember any of this because he was so young. Now all he cares about now, He's a happy-go-lucky boy. He'll come to us. He loves phones. He loves the iPhone. He knows how to work that thing so well. So he has his phone. He'll try to take your phone. And then he just enjoys having his feet tickled. So I always feel that it was such a gift at the end of the day, because he has become my hero, because he's gone through so much at such a young age that I don't think most adults even go through. And he just comes out with just a bright ray of sunshine. So for me, that's what it's like raising a special needs child. And just quickly to mention, also cognitive slow thinking, unfortunately. So he will learn at a slower pace than all other children with normal cognitive thinking. So that's, again, we're just so blessed that he made it through. And we do our best every day to teach him. But he learns a lot of it from his phone as well, aside from us doing what we can. In fact, he can go onto anyone's phone clean because he loves YouTube. He doesn't have an account. Within 2 minutes, he will find all his videos from a non-account. We have no idea how he does that. Not only that, he's figured out certain things that we didn't even know how to do. So it may be slow thinking and learning in some places, but when it comes to the iOS system, he has that down.
Hearing your story, like I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know the whole surgical aspect of it. So I was like, man, it's a lot of work. I know it's a lot of stress, and especially for the mom who gave birth. I know I can't even imagine what your wife was going through. I know my wife, she would be a mess if she had to go through that. So hats off to anyone who has a special needs child and doing the work to raise them.
So now, Jay, the other thing, we have kids. I'm sure at some point you realized you wanted kids and you had an idea of how it was going to go. But now the first one's here, and then you have the other three. So was there a difference between how you felt raising kids would be as to the reality of what it is to raise kids?
I don't know. I think when my wife told me she was pregnant, I kind of freaked out. I didn't know what to do, what to think. Like I said, like my wife, she was probably more like she wanted kids. She's always wanted kids. Me, I'm thinking, okay, how are we going to pay for this child? Because at this point, our careers are not what they are right now. Mm-hmm. So it was more stressful for me, I believe, just because that was like my mind and my thought process. I'm like, okay, we gotta get this baby food, how we're gonna clothe it and all that kind of stuff, and who's gonna watch the child when we're at work, because there was like a little story behind that, and we didn't know how that was gonna come to be. Eventually it worked itself out, but our initial thought, it wasn't gonna go that way initially. Reality, once we got into a routine, it was fine. Because you never know what you're going to do until you're in that situation. I just remember, it's like, I was kind of just like shocked. I think at this point I'm working 2 jobs. So I'm like, okay, my wife is not getting any sleep. I'm getting some sleep, but I'm still working 2 jobs at this point. And I'm like, just keep her alive. That's what I'm thinking. Just keep her alive. I was like, yeah. What about you, Mr. Mafuchi? What was your reality versus ideal of having a child and raising a child?
Yeah, I knew that it was going to be work. I didn't know the specifics of work. I know for the most part, you're not going to get much sleep, and you have to figure out how you're going to pay for this child, like you said before. But reality hits, the child's here. It's a lot of sleepless nights, especially for the mom, because she has to do a lot of taking care of, more so the breastfeeding. I don't know if the missus on your end did that, but nonetheless, the breastfeeding is brutal, exhausting, and just the child doesn't know any different. I'm never going to put that on the child. That's fine. But also, I'm a driver. I needed sleep, but the child was just, wake up in the middle of the night. And once my wife had enough, she would wake me up. And again, you can only handle so much, and I would do the best I could. And yeah, that's from the beginning stages. Now my kids are grown up, and they're out of the baby phase, out of crying, which is good for me. Once they started talking, that was cool. That was nice. We're able to communicate with one another. The thing that I did with my boy is I put him into the hobby that I always had as a child, which is video gaming. So once I put a controller in on his hands, that was it. He ended up being like me. So I like that because now we can play together. But the beginning is so rough. And people will always let you know, yes, this, that, and the other. And they were right. But every case is different. I don't think there was such an... well, I guess on my end, the special needs, that's an extreme. But otherwise, it's just a new experience. You just have to, like you said, get in a routine. Once you figure out that routine, just like with our children, once we got them into a sleep routine and a sleep schedule, oh, that was glorious. That was a glorious day. Because now we could sleep when they're sleeping, or at least take a nap. The one thing that I think everyone should know, more so women, sleep on your child's schedule. When they go to sleep, it doesn't mean, okay, I have time to do this. No, you sleep, because otherwise you are going to be more wrecked than you should be. Take up their schedule. That's all I can say. But yeah, the reality, beginning harsh, later you put in the work, and it turns out okay.
Question for you. When we first had our daughter, it's like they told us about tummy time. So for our daughter, like when she was born, she never wanted to be put down. So that was like an issue for us in the beginning, where she always wanted to be held, and she was always hungry. She always wanted to eat. And then I think one day I fell asleep. I thought she was on my chest, and I woke up. I thought I dropped her or something, but she was in her crib or bassinet or something. So I was like, that tells me how much lack of sleep I was getting.
You were telling me about how tired it was and putting her down. That brought up a story right away. So my wife had our firstborn on her chest. I think she was breastfeeding or not. I get home. I think I was showering, actually. I get in the room, and she wakes up, and all of a sudden she freaks out. I'm like, hey, what's going on? She's like, where's our son? Like, what do you mean, where's our son? And we had the crib next to us, and he wasn't in there either. And she's like, where is he? Freaking out. And I'm looking. Somehow, this is unexplained to us. Our firstborn, it was on the floor with a pillow or two pillows propped nicely, and he was just sleeping away like nothing happened. Now, if a child falls, theoretically, they're going to cry. So we are not sure to this day how our son just was on the floor with pillows. We're thinking, man, someone up above or some kind of angel was just looking out for us. Because to this day, we don't even... That's the leading theory we have. So now, Jay, we have our kids. We're talking about what they're doing now. But it all starts from the beginning, which is when they finally pop out of the missus and they hand them to you. So you with your daughter, do you remember what that feeling was like to hold her for the first time in your arms?
It was weird. One thing, I was thinking two things. One, I don't believe I have a child. And two, her head looks like a cone. So I was like, is there something wrong with my child? At this point, I didn't know, because the baby's position is pointed downwards. It's the head can be molded until after a certain amount of time, it just kind of is going to be whatever shape it's going to be in. That's one of the first things I thought about. Like, why is her head this way? And is there something wrong with her? And I want to have like other kids are like, okay, this is how it works. So, but yeah, I was like, okay. When she first popped out, like, she looked nothing like me. So I'm like, my genes are not as strong as I thought they were. So it was like, okay, because all my kids came out looking like their mom. So I'm like, Granted, my daughter looks like me now. She looks like me now, but they all came out looking like a spit image of their mom. Especially my daughter. Like the first time she came out, I'm like, you put them side by side, they look exactly alike.
Wow.
What about you? When you first held your son for the first time, what were your thoughts?
First thought was, don't drop him, okay? He's a wiggly guy. He comes out like that, but it's so funny that you mentioned the conehead thing because my firstborn was also a conehead. His head, but his shoulder also got caught trying to come out. So it wasn't going to happen. They had to do a C-section on my wife. He comes out, he has a conehead. And the doctor told us, yeah, this is from the pressure of trying to do natural, so that's normal. It's going to go down. I think I made fun of him once he started understanding and speaking, like, you are a conehead, by the way. And I always let him know about it. But, yeah, don't drop him. And then number two, wow, this thing is real. This isn't a Cabbage Patch doll in my hands. This is a living thing that now is going to rely on me. And I have to up my game on being able to support this nice bundle of joy here. And it's crazy that you mentioned that your daughter didn't look anything like you or none of your kids at the beginning, because there's a tale or a myth, however they want to call it, for the Native Americans, that the way the higher beings, whatever it is, the way the father knows it's their child is once they come out, they are almost a spitting image. That way the father cannot deny that this is their child. And that is what happened with both my children. They look like me from birth, coming out. But then once they grew up, now they look like their mom. And I just feel like I'm the gardener with this family. So it's just wild. But yeah, both of us had similar situations. We had cone heads, and mine looked like me and now don't. And then you had, I think, got the better end. They didn't look like you, now they do. So that's just crazy.
They said, I don't know where I heard this from, but they said when kids are first born, they resemble the father, so they don't leave the mother or leave the child. So I don't remember where I heard that from. I don't know if that's accurate or true, but I remember hearing that. But yeah, my wife, I feel they all look like her except for my daughter. My daughter looks more like me. I think my boys look like their mom. And depending on who you ask, they'll say they look like me. I don't see it. They have my big forehead, but that's about it. That's all I can see from them. But yeah.
I think my wife is kind, and she always says that they have my nose, so that's how you can tell they're. And I look at them like, that's not my nose. I mean, it's not her nose either, but all right, whatever. I have something of theirs.
Mr. Mafuchi, was the quantity of your kids similar or different between you and your wife?
Here's an interesting thing with my wife and I. We are both only children, so we were pretty much dead set on one. Like, let's just raise what we know. I'm an only child, you're an only child. We know how to raise one. We can give it everything that it needs. We'll probably be its besties because there's no other sibling. So for the longest time, we were good. About a couple years later, I think 6 years later, my wife just brought up out of the blue, it kind of resonated with me. Maybe we should give our only child a sibling. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I already had in my head that we were just going to have the one, and now you want the other one, which I wasn't against necessarily. I already had it in my head. So now she finally, I guess, wore me down in a sense. And I'm like, okay, I think we can handle this. I can we can handle a second, but that's it. All right. After that, it's done. And so I thought at first we were on the same page, and it turns out we weren't. But we had our second. So I am gonna throw this back to you, Jay, because I am very, very curious to know. Because I know you mentioned, not only this episode, but many others, which all of you somebody should be watching, by the way, that your wife was all about not just getting married, but she wanted children. So was that number for her the same as for you?
No. As like you and your wife, I was the only child, so I'm more selfish. I'm used to being by myself. I didn't really care for wanting siblings or anything like that. So my wife, she has siblings, so that's what she knows. That's what she wanted for her kids. So like they'll have like You want to have like sibling be your best friend for the most part. You don't really want to trust kids out there because you don't know what their motives are, how they were raised, things of that nature. And that's just like experience things that she grew up with. So initially when we started dating, this is before we even had kids, she gave me a number. I said, that's a high number. I don't know if I can do all that. So let's have one first and see if your body wants to go through all that. So we had the first one. I think we waited 3 years, and then I was like, "Are you ready to have the second one?" I was more like, "Okay, let's kind of get it out the way." And I'm like, "There's never a perfect time to have a child." I'll just put that out there. It's never a perfect time. Your plan is not God's plan. So we had the second one, and then I'm like, "Okay, we're good, right? We got a boy and a girl. We're done, right? We can be good, right?" And then sometime later, she was having baby fever. And she was talking about, maybe I want another one. I was like, oh, crap, right? I was like, so we talked about it, but it wasn't like full blown conclusion that we were going to have 3 kids. So when we actually sat down and talked about it, she was like, no, 3 is fine because she wanted more. So I was like, I kind of felt guilty because it wasn't okay. We discussed it and it was like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, type of thing. I'm more like I want to plan. I want to have something set in stone before I do anything. Like I want everything talked about. So that's more of me. So I'm a little OCD in that way. So yeah. So when we got to 3, we were like, okay, that is it. We're done because everybody always asked us, "Are you having any more? Are you having any more?" And I honestly don't like being asked that question. Other parents don't like being asked that either. So I don't even ask parents that, like, if you have any kids, you want any more, you can bring it up to me. I'm not going to ask and volunteer unless you volunteer that information. So I always said, if it's been more than 2 years, we're not having any more because most of my kids are 2 years apart. So like, if it's been 2 years, you're not going to see anymore. So that's how I'll leave that.
Wow. So officially, Jay just put away the pipe. It was done after the third, and it's more than 2 years. But Jay, you answered everything except what was the number. So what was wifey's original number?
I don't know if she wants me to reveal the number.
Wow.
I don't know if she wants to reveal the number.
Man, somebody's, I tried. We're not going to get that number. I wanted to know myself. I was a fan of this question, and I'm just left limp because I'm not going to get the answer. I may have to speak with the missus on my own, which is going to be a scary conversation in itself to see if I can get that number, and she authorizes it.
Mr. Mafucci, what is the joy in raising kids for you?
Well, the joy, I've said in other videos, I'm a truck driver, so at times I go away for a couple days, but when I come back, my kids just run up to me and they're so happy that I'm home. So that gives me a nice warm feeling. That's a hell of a greeting. They even trail my wife because my wife understands it's kids first. So that's a special feeling, number one, to get in there. And just, I guess, trying to get into what they're into. My youngest is all about the phone, and he'll take my phone and have 2 phones, and he's just happy, and I'll be right there next to him, trying to interact with it, like, oh, what's going on here, what's going on there. Half the time I don't even know, because I didn't even know you could do that with the phone. But with my oldest, it's video games, or we're just talking shop. More so with him, it's about excuse me, it's about dinosaurs. So I learned a lot about dinosaurs and animals, and we just every now and again I'll take them out to the park. That's nice, just to see them running around. More so my youngest, he just loves being outdoors. That's a good feeling. And then our thing is, believe it or not, something simple. Just going to Costco, going to the food court. My oldest loves the hot dogs. My youngest loves the ice cream. I enjoy both. So it's an awesome feeling just to be around. I didn't know that being a father could feel good. And that is, I guess that's essentially the joy. Because I was like you. I was okay not having children. More so because of the money aspect. Because I knew. And also career. I wanted to have a career first before I even thought about kids. Because that way I knew I could provide for them. So that was, I think, somewhat along the lines of what you were talking about, Jay. But yeah, just being around them, knowing that they want to be around me, that's a great feeling to have. And quite frankly, them still saying, the youngest more so, it's daddy. The older one is dad now. The Y just goes away after a certain age, which it kind of hurts, but I still have the younger one. I'm sure you probably have that as well, Jay. The dad. But daddy always feels better. And every now and again, my oldest will slip up and say daddy, and I'm like, oh yes. That all those things are the joy. And not to mention, it's wild because I'll look at my wife like, we're the parents? Like, at this age, you realize we're just big kids. But we have major responsibility because we are molding kids now. So again, nice joy. We're trying to set them on the right path. And hopefully they are good people at the end of the day, and that'll also feel great. Now, Jay, on your end, you have one more than me, and you have a daughter, so I'm sure there could be a difference. But ultimately, what is the joy you get out of having your children?
Honestly, recently, just speaking to them, having them develop their own personality and stuff like that, I like how they want to talk to me. Like my daughter, like when she's at school, she'll tell me how her day was, the latest gossip that's going on at the school. Um, she tell me about the shows that she's interested in, stuff like that. But we can have like a more of a different type of conversation because of her age. So we can talk about things that we like, don't like, stuff like that, and why you like it. Like my boys, my oldest son, he likes soccer, so he'll tell me, "Hey, Daddy, you know what I did today?" Or "Can I tell you what I did?" Or stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I like it where they feel they can come and talk to me. That's the aspect I do like, 'cause I was fearful that they may not want to do that. Um, so my oldest son, he loves wrestling, right? And I used to like it at his age as well. I was a big fan of wrestling growing up. And I grew out of it after high school just because I didn't get the time to sit there 2 hours watch a wrestling event. I just didn't have time. So he likes that. And my youngest son, he likes it too, but he more kind of replicates whatever his brother like. Whatever his brother like, he likes, pretty much. Like, they're like twins in that aspect. My youngest son hasn't developed his own personality as far as that aspect yet. But because I told them, I think it was last year, WrestleMania, I said, I can go ahead and we can rent, Peacock for that 1 month, for that one event, and do that, right? And because I haven't seen a WrestleMania now, how long? Probably since I'm in high school, right? So I'm way beyond whatever's going on. So when I told them, do you guys want to watch WrestleMania, and it almost got me back into wrestling until they messed up at the end. Like Cody Rhodes get lose from Reigns. But that's a different story. Another rant here another day. So I was like, do you guys want to do this like maybe yearly, watch WrestleMania? Because I'm not going to rent every pay-per-view. I ain't spend that kind of money just for wrestling. No. So they was like, yeah. And so during this year's WrestleMania, I was like, okay, the next time they have like a wrestling event near our city, we can go. So I was like, all right. And I think I saw it on when it was doing WrestleMania, like all the cities. I was like, oh, that looks like our city, but I wasn't sure. So I had to go research it. I was like, crap, this thing is expensive, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, let me see if I can get tickets. If I can get tickets, we'll go. So I didn't want to tell them anything until actually to purchase the tickets, right? So I was able to purchase the tickets, and they were expensive. I'll tell you that much, they were expensive. So I got that, so they're excited to go. So my daughter, she'll watch, but my boys are more wrestling fans in the household as of right now.